America's mad rush to socialism. It's happening. It's here. Thank you for joining me. 15 minutes with me, Brian Sussman. 15 minutes of unedited stream of consciousness conversation. More on me at briansussman.com. In fact, the notes that I'll be using for this podcast can be found at the website briansussman.com. So I invite you to go ahead and take a look at those if you find this to be a useful podcast. I believe it's going to be useful. I believe it's going to be convicting as well. And may I just say this on the onset? If you're a born-again Christian, or if you're my Jewish brother or sister, and you're voting Democrat, you are committing suicide. This is not your parents' Democratic Party. They've gone so far to the left, and they're pushing an agenda that is in complete opposition to the founding of this nation. So I'm going to be referring to my notes right off the bat by starting with John Adams. John Adams was the first vice president of the United States. He served President George Washington as his vice president from 1789 to 1797. So the American experiment, the American story goes back a long way. Now, due to Washington's tradition of establishing the two-term presidency, Adams became our country's second president. Adams was a lawyer. He was a devout Christian man. He was a deep thinker who held in high regard world history. And he was also a very bold man who became leader of the American Revolution, which led to the Revolutionary War against the world's most powerful nation, Great Britain. The eventual hard-fought victory that war secured brought forth America's groundbreaking independence. Adams then became a framer of the Constitution. And once the Constitution was complete, he said something that I hope you'll grasp right now. Quote, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Now, sadly, very few citizens under the age of 40, that would be millennials, Gen Z, Gen X, very few citizens in the United States under the age of 40 have little knowledge of what I just stated in this podcast's opening couple minutes. That's why I can't help but believe that without the mighty hand of God and his intervention, our nation is doomed to embrace, by compulsion, socialism. You see, America's founders were very, very convinced that government ought to support the morality and virtue revealed in the laws of nature and of nature's God, and articulated in the words of the Bible. Because it's from these that we derive our natural rights, which I talked about in the last podcast, of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have a right to life. You have a right to liberty, freedom from tyranny, the right to speak your mind, to have your own opinion. Even if your own opinion is garbage, you're entitled to that. And I am entitled to confront you with the truth. This is the way it's supposed to go in America. We can have very vivid discussions and hot debates. That's allowed in this country. But you see, the left doesn't believe in liberty. They believe in this monoculture whereby they will determine who has a right to speak what. And that's wherein the danger lies. And also there's the pursuit of happiness, which is the ownership of property and your ability to make a living for yourself as you see fit. You want to make a lot of money? You have that ability in the United States of America. It's called capitalism. It's called free enterprise. And socialists do not believe in any of that unless it's incredibly highly regulated and taxed. The government of the United States, the founders believed, ought not to be hostile to Christianity, but rather should support it with laws that are friendly to it and encourage its flourishing amongst the citizenry. For example, in Washington's farewell address, this is after he did his terms as president, he said, of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity. Religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. Now look how far we have drifted from our Christian, look how far our Christian nation has drifted from Washington's sage advice. We now have politicians and political activists pushing a wholly secular agenda that outright defies foundational biblical principles. We have abortion on demand. We have the LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ agenda. We have a welfare system that rewards birthing children out of wedlock. We observe Islamic holidays now in certain states. These are just a few of the obvious examples, but the bigger illustrations involve a multitude on the left who are fervently attempting to employ a form of government that would be socialism and communism that has utterly failed everywhere. Everywhere it has been employed, it has failed. And no. Socialism and its cousin communism are not forms of democracy. In 2019, 2019, Charles Cook was the editor of the National Review magazine. He was on my radio show and gave a blunt assessment that socialism is not and never can be democratic. Cook said that voters should not be fooled by the left's attempts at rebranding a horrendously failed doctrine. He said, quote, socialism cannot be made compatible with democracy. At worst, socialism eats democracy and is swiftly transmuted into tyranny. At best, socialism stamps out individual agency, places civil society into a straitjacket of uniform size, and turns representative government into a chimera. Cook went on to quote from an essay he presented at National Review. He said, quote, after studying 6,000 years of history, the lessons learned shout to us. Never relinquish, now please listen to this, never relinquish the right to free speech, the right to free conscience, the right to freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, or the right to a jury trial. And whatever you do, don't be seduced by socialist bearing promises. But if you are seduced, get out before it's too late. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Wow. Again, this is all up at briansussman.com. In my most recent book, Climate Cult, and I highly encourage you to go to amazon.com and pick up get your book for yourself, because I reveal the nexus between socialism and the environmental movement. But I touch on the evil initiator of socialist tyranny and violence. That would be Vladimir Lenin, the first leader of the Soviet Union. Lenin was a friend of Karl Marx, a huge fan. And it was Lenin who exhorted his followers to this: exert merciless mass terror, his words, against the opposition. This isn't just about accumulating political power, he believed, but it was the pursuit of a sacred mission to see a socialist world order. That was Vladimir Lenin. That's what Marx believed. That's what these DSAers believe, the Democrats, Socialists of America. They all believe the same thing: a socialist world. Later, when farmers in the Soviet Union decided to collectively resist the government, Lenin's successor, that would be Joseph Stalin, engineered a famine in which as many as 10 million starved to death. It was as if he was saying, I'll teach you farmers a lesson. You're going to rebel against the state? Watch what happens. You know, though the left drools with this phony compassion, this is how their sacred socialist doctrine treats its enemies: death. There's no tolerance. In the later stages of Soviet communism, and I have friends who can verify this, a woman would sell herself for a pair of Western blue jeans. In Venezuela today, a socialist country, despite being a country with vast oil reserves, they should be incredibly wealthy. Their socialist economy right now is a wreck, and people are actually exchanging family heirlooms for a bit of food. In the 40-plus nations that have suffered under socialism, the record of failure is crystal clear, my friends. Socialism is not compatible with the U.S. Constitution. It promises benefits that never make anyone equal. The economy produced by a socialist government always results in environmental degradation, as I explained in Climate Cult, mass shortages, and poor health care, just to name a few. Nonetheless, even as Mother History shouts out her warnings, the threat of a socialist America looms. The 2020 elections, the 2026 midterm elections were a harbinger, and the big winners were dyed-in-the-wool members of the Democrat Socialists of America. This is an organization that seeks to dismantle our Constitution. Please listen to what I'm saying. The DSA is an organization that seeks to dismantle our Constitution and employ the poisoned philosophy of Karl Marx. Let me give you some quick examples. In New York, Representative and DSA member AOC did not just turn back her well-known Latina challenger, which was the CNBC anchor Michelle Caruso Cabrera. She crushed her, winning 75% of the vote. Another DSA member, Representative Rashida Tlaib, easily defeated Detroit City Council President Brenda Jones, very liberal woman, trounced her 66.3 to 33.7. Still another, Ilhan Omar, won her Minnesota primary against a very well-funded, very liberal challenger with 74% of the vote. In each case, the socialists defeated otherwise liberal Democrats who were attractive, organized, and had plenty of money. But it didn't matter because an overwhelming majority of Democrat primary voters endorsed the AOC Tlaib Omar vision of a socialist America, including the asinine $1 million Green New Deal. 3 other Democrats in the House of Representatives lost their seats to DSA candidates. Representative Lacey Clay of Missouri, a 20-year incumbent, lost to Cori Bush, a champion of Black Lives Matter. Representative Elliot Engel of New York, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, was defeated by progressive school principal Jamal Bowman. Representative Dan Lipinski of Illinois, one of the very few pro-life Democrats in Congress, got smashed by leftist challenger Marie Newman. In New York, 5 statewide candidates for the General Assembly who had been endorsed by DSA all won their primaries. Several had come behind victories because of absentee ballots, which, by the way, are a key socialist initiative to ensure rigged elections. They ran on platforms that included the Green New Deal, single-payer health care, criminal justice reform, housing for New York State's 70,000 homeless, affordable housing for the poor, new taxes on the rich, and Wall Street to pay for all of it. Their goal, as set forth in campaign literature, and I'm not making this up, is to, quote, advance a vision for a socialist world. My stomach turns. I hope yours does as well. Socialists found receptive voters all across the country in these last couple of elections. Even in Montana, 6 Bernie-crats won their primaries. San Francisco elected DSA member Chesa Boudin, son of leftist militants. They elected Chesa, I think that's how you pronounce the name, district attorney. And in the California primary, exit polls revealed that 53% of Democrats viewed socialism favorably. That's in California, but get this, in Texas, Democrat voters in the primary approved of socialism by 56%. That's in Texas. Socialism is indeed riding a wave of momentum when more Democrats in Texas than California view it favorably. Take note, friends. And then there is DSA member Senator Bernie Sanders, who raised more money than any other candidate in 2020, an estimated $200 million, as he was running for president, and won the Iowa caucuses and the primaries in New Hampshire and Nevada, but he was unable to overcome the deep pockets of the Democrat establishment, which is clearly seeing its last days of influence. Just mention the name of longtime Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi to the younger generation of liberals, and they'll give you an eye roll. She's old news. And just to confirm, in those recent midterms, they brought us, the midterms we've just had, they brought us a Democrat congressional candidate in Maine with a Nazi tattoo, a fake Christian running for governor in Texas as a Democrat, who contends there are 6 genders, and another governor candidate in Wisconsin who wants to abolish the police. And that's just the low-hanging fruit. Socialists need class struggle that focuses on presenting capitalism and Christianity as dangerous. Hence you have these slogans: tax the rich, abolish ICE, defund the police, save the planet, my body, my choice, be proud, be gay. How is this failed political theory advancing so steadily? In large measure because of 4 things: ignorance of history, the new monoculture, government bungling, and coddled kids. The ignorance of history is obvious. It's the result of a public education system that has been overrun with progressive teachers and administrators that push a pro-socialist agenda, not just in the history classes, but across all subject content. And sadly, most private institutions are also guilty, including many so-called Christian schools. The resulting groupthink lends itself to a successful indoctrination program that pushes socialism, environmentalism, transgenderism, big government, and anti-Israel, pro-Islam anti-Semitism. Meantime, big government policies, mostly created by Democrat leadership, that interfere with the economy and overspend taxpayer dollars put a bad taste in the mouths of younger voters who conclude the current form of government is broken and needs to be replaced with one that takes from the rich and gives to the poor. And as for the coddled kids, overprotective helicopter parenting and lavishing children with uncritical self-esteem have brought us teenagers and young adults who are raised without the critical life skills of learning how to work through anxiety, work through bad news, and work through life's daily challenges. And because millennial parents want to be best friends with their kids instead of performing their proper leadership role, they do not set limits on their child's social media consumption. And because too many young adults are unable to bridle their addiction to smartphones, we now have a generation who demand safe places where they can sustain their pathetic attention spans, which, by the way, according to Dr. John Lennox, and there's a link at my website to his website, the current younger adult attention span now is 8 seconds. A goldfish can do 9. You know, I was brought up in a household that loathed, as I've discussed in previous podcasts, we loathed socialism and communism. Excuse me. My grandfather escaped the Soviet pogroms in the early 1900s only because his parents scrapped together funds to send him to the United States with this admonition: go to America, get a job, make money, send for your brother. David Sussman did just that. And he was only 13 years of age. There's not a 13-year-old in the United States of America who could pull something off like that, let alone many teenagers. But he did it. And I thank God daily that he did. And I pray to God daily for the United States of America. And the prayer is very simple. Lord, please bring a spiritual revival to this nation. Amen. If you found what you heard to be profitable, please share this. And again, my website, for the blog post associated with this at briansussman.com. God bless your day.